Hello and welcome back to Dicebreaker. We are once again here in Gen Con 2022 here in Indianapolis. We are recording this after our second day here at the convention.
Yes.
Talking about some of the games that we've seen so far, some of the ones that we're really excited about. One that is all right, but we'll get to that in a second. If you've not seen our previous video, we're talking about some of the most, what's the word? The games
highlights
that made an impression on us the most, from all of the ones that we've seen so far. It has, I will say, there's a lot of games around.
There's a lot of games.
Yeah, my God. But Gen Con hasn't run for the past 2 years, so I think, or rather,
it was
the
back
2 years
last
before
year,
that
but
one.
yeah, it was quieter than it is. It was busier today. And tomorrow's Saturday, and I'm expecting it to be very busy tomorrow.
Yeah, so there's been a lot going on, but we're going to just talk about some of the ones that we had the most important experiences with.
Yep.
Starting off with probably the weakest of the four.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So feel free to skip past if you're not interested. But
somewhat obliged, I would say, as two British people visiting America to play the Great British Baking Show board game.
The Great British Baking Show board game.
Yeah, which it's worth noting is not coming to the UK, the home of the Great British Bake Off.
It's not coming to Britain.
Because of licensing stuff. It's from Ravensburger. It's an interesting take on the idea of baking.
Yeah, I was expecting, and actually to be fair, I will say that I think they've done like the best job they could with the theme that they had.
Yeah.
Because I was expecting like a pretty sort of, kind of like slow-paced, relaxed card game. But in actual fact, it's like a very quick, sort of real-time kind of object building game.
Yeah, you're not baking cakes as much as you are constructing them from different, like cards. So you'll have a tile or a card of dough.
Yeah, they're like these sort of long, thin rectangles.
Yeah.
And you'll have like standard dough, and then each one has
sparkly dough.
Yeah, like sparkly dough is like good crumb.
Good crumb?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you've also got like soggy dough as well, which will give you the soggy bottom if you're not careful. But the most interesting thing, we've got some very loud people next to us, sorry if you can hear those. The most interesting thing about it was the fact that, it was like a race to the finish, which now that I think about it, makes perfect sense for Bake Off. Like timed challenge, loads of things going wrong. It's kind of got like a sort of...
It's got the good time pressure element to it.
It's got a bit of a calamity aspect to it.
Yeah.
There's even like a sort of, like a bin that you can throw your stuff in. If you're like, oh God, it's all gone wrong, chuck it in the bin.
Yeah.
And they've even got like a little element of like they were saying that one of their favourite aspects of it was the wholesomeness of it.
Yeah,
so
in the show they kind of help each other out and so on.
But the weird thing is, you don't actually help each other. You just get help from a pool of things in the middle of the table, which is kind of weird.
Like a divine helping hand as you're baking in the kitchen.
Yeah, so you pick from like a theme in the way that you would on the show. So
yeah, they have the different rounds. So they have technical, showstopper, signature bake. I think are the three, and they have different recipes.
But then each one is in a set because you've got like you've got cake week, you've got biscuit week, pastry week, whatever.
And the art is by the person who does the art on the show.
Yes.
So it does look super faithful. Like it seems well thought out.
Yeah.
So
I do think it's like a very faithful adaptation. Like I think it's why it's worth talking about.
It's at least interesting, right? Like you say, it's not what you'd expect from just a licensed card game based on a TV show.
Yeah.
Unlike Squid Game.
Exactly. I think they've done a good job, but it still didn't really leave much of a lasting impression on me. Yeah. I wonder if we had gotten to some of the more difficult rounds, obviously we just had a quick demo, if we had done one of the more complicated ones, would we be like, ooh, okay, that's what's going on here?
Yeah, so it kind of ramps up. They showed we were doing a quite simple one where you had to have dough around the outside, a filling, then a decoration on top. If you're first to finish, you get more points, so there's an element of wanting to get through your cards and build it quickly, but that then leaves room for making mistakes and soggy bottoms. But you're also trying to fulfill
There's
bonuses.
also like a tiered system, right? Yeah. So whilst you might get more points than someone for finishing first, they might get points from the fact that they have filled all the credentials. So it goes from soggy bottom, which is you finished, to...
Hollywood handshake.
What was the middle one?
Dunno.
Good bake, just strong bake, something like that. Good bake. And then, the Hollywood handshake if you got all of the steps fulfilled. So there's like a sort of risk-reward thing of like, oh, I'm taking more time, so someone might steal the points from me, but it's worth it to try and get the best, version of the cake or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it was like the most exciting, impactful game that I've seen at the show.
But it also seems fairly short. It seems fairly cheap. It seems absolutely fine.
Yeah. So if you're not in Britain, then keep an eye out for the Great British Baking Show. Next up, not spending too much time on that one, but next up we saw...
let's do Dungeons, Dice and Danger.
Yeah,
which is also
absolutely.
Ravensburger.
We literally just finished playing this.
Yes.
New game by Richard Garfield.
Richard Garfield of Magic the Gathering and King of Tokyo fame.
And Keyforge and all that.
Yeah, but nothing like any of those games.
Yes, this is a roll and write. For those not familiar with the genre, you are rolling dice and then everyone has like a little notepad which has all of the like scoring stuff on it.
Yeah.
One nice thing about roll and writes is all of the information is right in front of you.
Yes.
And you're like crossing off boxes and all that kind of stuff. Things like Railroad Ink, for example, where you're drawing little train lines, all that kind of stuff. In this one, as you probably expect from Richard Garfield, it's got a fantasy theme. You are sort of dungeon crawling, which is actually
it's a
maybe
cool theme.
I would expect this to have already been a thing, but I've not seen.
I think there are some roll and write dungeon crawlers out there. I don't know how this compares, but I think this has a nice look. I thought initially that the artwork might have been by Carl Ferrin of Root fame, because it's really got that kind of like.
But I didn't.
Stylized look.
I was like, no, Matthew, I know my Carl Ferrin, and that's not Carl Ferrin.
And you were right.
And
it's
I was
not
correct.
Carl Ferrin. I can't remember the artist's name, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it has that vibe. It's quite bright. It's quite like characteristic as a fantasy
Very
thing.
stylized and sketched.
Yeah, and there's a bear, scorpion, and stuff like that as monsters. Like there's a beholder.
Yeah, very bright and colourful.
Yeah.
And the vibe of the game is that you've got, as I said, you've got your little notepad. You pull off a sheet. And what's quite cool is there's 4 different dungeons that you can tackle as well.
Yeah.
So we did the easiest one, which was the
like
bear, scorpion.
annoying animals or something like
animals,
that.
but then there's also like dinosaurs and
a pyramid, I think.
And they all have their own interesting little mechanics and things like that you'll run into. But essentially, you do have a dungeon. So you've got 2 entry points, which are these sort of green tiles that you don't have to cross off, but you can use them if you need to, but we'll get onto why in a second. But essentially, one of the players will roll 5 dice, 4 of them are white, which anyone can use, and there's a black die that the active player can use for free, but the other players have to spend some of their points.
Yeah, they can only do it like 3 times each game. And
but using those dice, you are then going to pair them up and collect their collective sum. They're literally just D6s.
Yeah.
So you know
they're quite nice and light. They're like little wooden dice.
If you've played, what's the World War II hex game from Days of Wonder?
Oh, Memoir 44?
If you play Memoir 44, it's those dice. You know, those very light little wooden rounded edge ones. But essentially, like, let's say you've got like a 3 and a 4 and a 5 and a 6. Sorry, then you can combine the 3 and the 4 to make a 7. You find a 7 sort of tile in the dungeon that you are either next to, i.e., you have crossed something off which leads to that tile, or is already next to a starting tile.
Yeah, so you do have to work your way through. You are kind of crawling your way through the dungeon.
But interestingly, you're not then locked to that position, like, and then go over to the other side and start doing stuff over there.
Yeah, it's fairly forgiving. I think it's more about the route you take rather than whether you can take a route.
But then the interesting thing obviously comes from what you discover in the dungeon. So it's littered with these mini bosses, which once you've reached their space, you know, they have certain numbers that you have to roll to do damage to them.
Yep.
Some of them you need to activate rooms next to that boss to be able to use that number. Otherwise, you can only use like 1 in most cases. Right in the middle, you've got the main boss as well, who's very hard to take down.
Yeah.
And then in between all of those, outside of the sort of blank spaces, you've got loads of strange little things you can interact with. So there are treasure chests that, by unlocking them, you can grab like an item which gives you special powers.
Yeah.
There are these like damage spaces which, if you activate them with a double, then it damages all the bosses in the dungeon by 1, which are really good. And then there are gems which you can pick up as well, which are just points. And you're effectively trying to crawl through and get as many points as possible.
You're ultimately racking up points, but it's fairly straightforward. Like you're defeating monsters, you're getting treasure, and I liked it. Like it's light, it's fairly breezy, but I think that's kind of how you want a roll and write to be, because there is still that element of like you're looking at the dice and going like, okay, well I can pair up those and those, I can pair up those and those.
It's a good brain
Then
teaser.
like I've got the paths that I can go on.
Yeah.
So I think it's about the right level. Like it didn't feel too much, but it felt like there was enough happening. I liked it.
No, I genuinely I think we should grab a copy and play it on the plane. You know, like it's a good like very like low energy. Like very relaxed and slow paced. The opposite of the Great British Baking Show.
And it has a solo mode as well, like a lot of roll and rides. So you just play as if I think you play as if you were always not the active player, so to get the black die, you would always have to spend a thing. So
yeah, and I think if you do like those kind of solitaire games, there is like not a whole lot of player interaction as you probably expect. I think the only thing that you're basically competing over is who does things first.
Who defeats if you defeat a monster first, you get a better bonus, and then others that defeat it get a lesser bonus but still get stuff.
There's a quite nice little touch where if another player has already defeated a boss, it becomes 1 point weaker for you because it's come back. It's already a little bit injured from the past.
Yeah, it's nice.
Which is quite nice. And yeah, it feels thematic. Like it doesn't feel too abstract. Like it's like I'm crawling through a dungeon. I'm having fights. I'm picking up treasures.
Yeah.
And if you are into that sort of classic D&D style dungeon crawl, if you like roll and writes, if you like little sort of very simple games that not even that simple, but very relaxed,
just
not
enough.
too mind melting, then I think it would be perfect for you. But
yeah. It was good. It's not what I expected from Richard Garfield. You think of like a lot of card games, obviously, like King of Tokyo has dice, but I don't remember another roll and write from Richard Garfield. But this feels like a pretty good.
It's quite interesting because when he doesn't do big trading card games, he does do sort of very light kind of
some interesting stuff,
family friendly-esque kind of party stuff, which fair play.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Okay, another thing we played. Although briefly, we got a run through of Gardeners.
Yes.
Which is the new game from Casper Lap.
Which is
Magic
Maze guy, yeah. So it's the sit-down games. I believe this is out now. Is that the one that was out now?
No, I think this is coming out.
Right, okay.
There
was one that was out now.
my notebook.
Oh, that might have been the card flipping thing that we were
Gardeners will be released after Essen in October.
There you go.
So mid to late October.
Yeah, so this is a sort of tile-laying co-op real-time game.
Yeah, if you played Magic Maze, will sound familiar.
Yeah, you've got 15 minutes on a
very big sand timer.
With like a big chunky
one.
When
the person from Sit Down Games showed it to us, it's like, oh, this is 15 minutes, but there's a single sand timer.
So which fair play, Yeah. So you've got that amount of time to try and get through as many of these little objective cards as you can. And what happens is, whoever's turn it is, picks up an objective card, and they look at a sort of a thing, much like Decorum that we talked about yesterday.
Yes.
There's like a specific rule that the board has to follow. If you're playing like the baby mode, it's like a 4x4.
4x4, they're
and then it goes on to
normal
6x6, which is, he was like, it's quite intense.
It
for your
was
first
intense
game.
even 4x4.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, like.
So these rules, obviously we just played like the sort of tutorial one, so they get a bit more complicated in the main game.
Like Magic Maze, it ramps up over a set of like scenarios before you get onto the main game.
It teaches you how to play as you're doing it. But they were quite simple. They're like, oh, you need like a contiguous 6 shape at least with like flowers and trees in it or whatever, or the same but with grass. Then there are ones where it's like, these two things can't be together.
You can't have a red tree next to like an orange flower.
Yeah, or there has to be at least 2 in a pair of every one of these things that are on the board. The thing is, that rule that the person is looking at then goes face down and the other player cannot see it. So they're trying to lay out the tiles, and all the other player can do is just take something out if it's not right.
Yeah.
So they'll just be like, no, can't do that. And as you'd expect from the maker of Magic Maze, you can't communicate. You can just do actions. So you've got this interesting thing where you're kind of going through the motions and trying to figure it out, and eventually they'll be like, yeah, you've got it correct.
Yeah.
And at that point, the next player then draws a card,
another objective,
and you do it in reverse.
But the old one stays in play, so you're like layering another requirement on top.
And that keeps going until there's 3 on the table in total. And then after you've done that, every single one that you then draw again after, because you've got it right again, you then get rid of the oldest one, and that becomes a victory point. So that's kind of your scoring mechanism.
As many of those as
getting
you can
through as many as possible.
Minutes.
And it genuinely, it looked very confusing at points. Matt was being the guinea pig.
Yeah, and it started out like, on the backs of the objective cards, it gives you just a little hint of what it could be. So it's like, okay, this is one to do with adjacent tiles, and this one is to do with like pattern arrangement, something like that.
Again, much like the game that we were talking about yesterday, Quirky
like
Circuits. There is a lot of like limited communication games that have been shown off Gen Con this year.
Yeah, but it was even, like I say, we were learning on a 4x4, and we were back and forthing and drawing new cards, and we got through a few, and then the representative from Sit Down showed us the later stage objectives, And it was like, okay, you can't have things on the outside. You get benches, and benches need to look at each other in
suddenly
straight lines.
orientation becomes a thing. There are paths that need to connect.
It feels like it ramps up in a big way. But it was cool. Like, it was... Magic Maze is really neat and very hard, like surprisingly hard. And this has a similar feel to it, where it's like the general thing of like, okay, you either are the one adding tiles or you're the one taking tiles away. Simple enough. But as soon as you start layering on all these different needs of the cards, it starts to get very, like, it's a lot to think about. So,
and when we were playing the sort of introductory one, once Matt had figured out what was going on with a rule, he would flip it and show it to you so you could just reference that. But in the main game, all of the cards are always face down at all times.
I think you flip it once you've fulfilled it, so...
No, that's only in the beginner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it becomes even harder in that case.
God.
Where it's like you also need to be remembering what the rules are, and then you're like, oh god, no wait, that one's already been discarded. Yeah. I'm playing with the wrong rules. Yeah, it looks like it gets pretty hectic.
Yeah.
But I love those like silly real-time games. Like I love like really slapstick war games, so I'm really excited to give it a go when it's released.
And speaking of something I'm really looking forward to, was another game from Sit Down Games, which was Redwood.
Yes.
So this is from the designer of Colt Express, and it is a game about animal photography, but it's
nature photography.
Yes, flowers as well. But it's not just like abstracted out into, okay, you're collecting cards and that represents photos. You have a board that represents, I guess, a natural park, and then you are a photographer, and you move with movement templates that are a bit like Star Wars X-Wing.
Yeah.
And then you have
like these odd little, what was it?
A neoprene
bum. Neoprene bum on what will be a miniature. In the B-roll that you'll see is the prototype, so you'll just see
it's like a little puck.
Yeah, a little puck. But when you put your finger on that, it won't move. And then you get these little templates that have like almost like spanner ends that you attach to it, and you rotate around trying to find a path to where you want to go without like stepping on an animal.
Yeah, you can't go for animals, can't go for other players. And once you get in position, you then get your camera out, which is represented by like a field of vision template. And you're trying to get as many, well, you'll have a card that specifies how many different things you need to have in your photograph. And then you're trying to swivel that around from your point of view to capture to get what it requires. So it's like, okay, you need 4 elements in this photo. So it could be plants, could be animals, or it could be the fact that you need to be stood on the lake in the middle of the board, but then also capture the required like animal or whatever it may be.
And it does have that feeling of like, oh, I'm taking a photo for like National Geographic.
Yeah, because it's all about position, it's all about kind of getting in the right spot, lining up, it's a really good, inventive way of capturing that sense of, I need to get the perfect angle.
Yeah, and it's another one of those games where, again, it's a concept we never would have thought of, and then we see it and we're like, oh, that makes perfect sense, it's really smart. It's got that, beautiful mirroring between the theme and the mechanics as well. They've even got this little mechanic where, so each of these little aperture templates where it's here's the cone of vision of your shot, they have these little holes in the templates, and if you can line up the shot perfectly so that the targets of your photo, like the animals or plants or whatever, are visible through that hole, you found the perfect focal
it's like getting
point.
It in focus,
so you score extra points as well. There's also the thing of the direction of your photograph will depend on the background you have. So the actual board is sort of split, as you'll see in the B-roll, into these kind of coloured segments, almost like a Trivial Pursuit token or whatever. And each of those sort of coloured segments, if you're photoing that area, you'll then get that background, and that background will then add to a sort of tableau in front of you.
Yeah, you're trying to form a panoramic.
Yeah, because you'll make a nice sort of panorama, almost like it's that Japanese travelling game where you build up the paintings. Tokaido, yeah. It's got that kind of contiguous image that just sort of lines across in this really lovely piece of art. We were looking at these games, you're like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. And then I saw that thing at the end of the table, it was all laid out, and I didn't really understand what was happening.
Yeah, because it was a prototype, so it's kind of weird bits of plastic and strange movement templates, a weird hockey puck thing.
Yeah. But then as soon as he started playing around with it, I was like, oh, this is genius.
Yeah.
This is so smart, I can't wait to play this.
It's kind of got that thing of, again, it's relatively simple in concept because you are just moving, trying to find the right angle, trying to line up that shot, but everything just makes sense. So after you photograph an animal, it will move away as well. So the animals are constantly moving around the board. I think the sun moves around the board in some ways. And yeah, it was a really cool thing where like I say, the movement of it is almost more like a miniatures game like Warhammer or X-Wing, because you're using like a ruler, but then you are, like using a field of vision thing. I think they had different ones with different angles, which I assume are
so a
different
wide angle
cameras.
lens will give you like a short of depth of focus and all that kind of. As someone who uses cameras for a job, I was really like, oh, this is really like truthful to the medium. Like it's really cool. But yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to that one. I think that's much like Decorum. That's been one of my favourite things from the show so far. Yeah,
so I think that's coming to crowdfunding in November. They said so. I would expect next year will probably be the release. But yeah, it immediately made me want a Pokemon Snap version. I said to you as we walked out, it's like, this would be incredible as a Pokemon Snap game.
But I will say, like, the current art that they've got,
it's lovely.
Looks beautiful.
It's really lovely,
if you like games like Parks with that kind of like gorgeous like American national park kind of iconography, even the board game cover was like, I think again we'll have some B-roll of it. It's like the lens of a camera with like a world going out of it. It's really pretty.
Really nice. And nice to see a game that is like has those kind of wargaming ideas, but it's about photography.
Yeah, completely
rather
non-violent.
Than fighting something.
So, but yeah, that was Redwood, and that is all the games that we've got from day 2.
So yeah, Great British Baking Show game, Dungeons, Dice and Danger, Gardeners, and then Redwood were the 4 games we just spoke about.
So if you want to see even more coverage from us here at Gen Con, we have got day 1 that is already up on the YouTube channel. If you're not watching this on youtube.com/Dicebreaker, come and give us a look. And please do hit subscribe, click the bell icon to get notified whenever we put a new video live. And give us a like and a comment as well, because it helps with the algorithm. We will have more videos coming out this weekend as we have more stuff from the show. But if you want to see even more coverage, you can head on over to Dicebreaker.com, where Matt will be having all kinds of news, interviews, reviews, whatever you can think of. And we do that pretty much every day anyway. So if you're interested in tabletop stuff, come and have a look. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you on the next one. But until then, have a lovely day. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.